Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. Maintenance Man by Glum Passenger. I, a female, moved to a new apartment a few months ago and live alone. I've been continuously creeped out by the maintenance guy. I can't tell if he's just nice and nosy or possibly has bad intentions. On my move-in day, he already knew me by name and was waiting by his truck to greet me. I'm 27, and he is probably in his 40s or 50s, and I think has mentioned that he has a daughter. In the first few weeks when I would work out in the gym, he would constantly walk by, and I would catch him looking at me. The first time I had a maintenance request, he started texting me from his personal phone about the request, kept asking if I would be home, I happened to be at work, and then came and left the unit multiple times already according to the texts. After he left, he texted me about how he noticed a magnet on my fridge from North Carolina and wanted to know why I had it, and started chatting about his personal life and how he used to live there. This was in the evening over text after the maintenance request was completed. I tried to be short and sweet in my replies because I didn't want to have a personal conversation with this man, but I also didn't want to be rude. Also, seeing as I have about 15 or so magnets from different places on my fridge, I thought it was weird that he was standing around reading all of them. He then started texting me every time I got a package to inform me it was delivered. The next time I had a maintenance request, he brought a package in for me. Mind you, the package room is all the way across the complex, and it may have been a nice gesture, but it still felt a little strange to me. I sent him an email asking that he please communicate with me over email instead of text for organizational reasons, because my texts delete frequently. That isn't a lie, but the truth is I was feeling uncomfortable with the texting, and he agreed to that. Last night I submitted a new request about my HVAC, and he sent me a message in the portal that he would be coming by in the afternoon. Again, I was at work. I didn't see any updates posted about what he found or fixed online. When I got home from work, I saw a note on my counter. It was a handwritten note that said he is not ignoring me, but has been advised by the office to not have direct written communication with the occupants. I'd like to give him the benefit of the doubt, but I expected the note to be an update about the maintenance request. And now I'm wondering, why would the office advise him not to talk to residents? Maybe someone else was uncomfortable with the texting communication and told them? Also, the fact that he knows he's not supposed to communicate with me and chose to leave me a note anyway doesn't sit right with me. Sometimes It's Not Pretend by Produce Even. I grew up in the backwoods of Washington State. My family lived on a 5-acre plot of land, and more than half the property was covered by dense woods that expanded past our property line for miles. My entire childhood was spent in those woods with my brother, playing, climbing trees, and catching frogs at the pond. It was everything two guys could ask for. One late summer night, I believe my twin and I were about 8. I heard someone screaming outside far off in the woods. I was the only one to hear it because I had my window open. It scared me to the core. I'd heard screams before, but they were from coyotes. This was different. I went to my brother's room and opened the window to see if he could hear it as well. And sure enough, he did. Not wanting to bother our parents about it, we decided not to say anything. After about a week of these screams, though, we decided to tell our parents, and my parents told us it was probably coyotes and nothing to be afraid of. But every day, the screams sounded like they were getting closer to the house. Then outdoor toys went missing. I wasn't able to find my skateboard that I left outside one night. My brother's bike was taken, and our favorite pool inflatables went missing. We told our parents again about the screams and now our toys being gone, and of course they said that the screams were coyotes, and that our stuff went missing because we didn't take care of them and they probably got lost. The screams were getting so loud and sounding so close to the house that I stopped sleeping with my window open. But there was one night that I could hear yelling that sounded closer than ever before. I peered out the window, and what I saw sent shivers down my spine and paralyzed me with fear. Just outside my second-floor bedroom window that looked over the backyard into the edge of the woods, I saw the figure of a slender person. Even from my window, I could see the moon reflecting off the whites of his eyes. Large, and they seemed to be bulging out of the sockets. The eyes were fixed on the house, unmoving. It was a man. He stood a foot taller than the tall wooden fence that separated the backyard from the trees. His gaze slowly shifted towards my window. He caught sight of me, and slowly, with slender legs, he made his way across the fence to the gate. And I thought, oh no, he's coming my way. What do I do? He kept getting closer, and I couldn't move. He got close enough for me to see his face clearly. His mouth wide open, an expression of surprise on his face, because of just how much his eyes bulged from his sockets. I mean, they were doing that so much so that I couldn't even imagine how he could blink. A head decorated with tufts of hair, and most of his scalp was bare. It seemed as though his hair had been pulled out. His clothes were all ratty and dirty, and he wasn't wearing any shoes. He stepped right under my window and stared up at me, his eyes unmoving and unblinking. His mouth opened like he was having a perpetual scream, but he was silent. I'm not sure how long we stared at each other. It felt like minutes. Even though I was frozen in fear, a blood-curdling scream came from the face that was still unmoving and unblinking. I was still frozen in fear, until a blood-curdling scream came from that face that was unmoving and unblinking. That broke the hold of my body, and I jumped back from the window and ran straight to my brother's room. He heard the scream as well, and we busted into our parents' room screaming and crying. They assumed I just had a bad nightmare and scared my brother, and no matter how much I pleaded, they wouldn't believe me. The last week of summer was the worst of them all. The man with the bulging eyes stared at me from the tree line every night. And every once in a while, I would see him during the day, and every time I yelled for someone to come over and see him, he'd disappear. When school started up, I was relieved to not be at home all the time. I mean, that was stressful. I started hearing and seeing the man less and less, and I started to think maybe it was my imagination that conjured up this image. Maybe my parents were right. I mean, as a kid, I did have quite the imagination. However, one late Tuesday night, there was a knock at our front door. The thought of the screaming man came into my mind. I mean, now was he knocking? Could he be coming to try to take me? My father answered the door and greeted a cop. The cop explained that the neighbors had called 911 for someone who had broken into their pool house. The officer told my father that the man had been living in the woods for a few months, and that if anything went missing over the summer, then we might find it at the camp that this intruder had set up. I went out the back door to catch a glimpse of the man that broke into the neighbor's property. And putting my face up near the car window to peer into the dark cop car, a face slowly inched closer to the other side of the glass. Eyes bright white and bulging, mouth ajar, and tufts of hair became visible. It was the screaming man from the summer. I guess, after telling this story, the message I'm trying to say is that kids aren't always playing pretend when they say they're seeing a monster. I sure wasn't. Something Out There, submitted by Randy O. This happened in August of 2000 near Campbell River, Vancouver Island, British Columbia. I was working for a company that had to traverse and survey private selectively logged woodlots, and I was doing it with another coworker. On this day, we had traveled to this woodlot with a third person, but had dropped him off at a spot in excess of a kilometer away. As well, the site was accessible only by a single gravel road that we were on, and to be reached any other way would require extensive cross-country travel over rather rough terrain. It was not reasonable at all to expect to run into another person at this location. But anyway, our first unusual encounter occurred at one of our first plots of the day. The vegetation here was a young regenerating Douglas fir woodland with rather bushy, well-spaced trees in excess of 20 feet tall, and a dense continuous matrix of thigh-high salal. While going through our routine, we were suddenly startled by what sounded like human footsteps in the bushes, perhaps as close as 50 to 70 feet away, just on the other side of a bunch of Doug fir trees, and therefore out of our sight. We'd heard no footsteps leading up to these ones, and only heard them when we were quite close. They had the distinct sound of a bipedal gait, with single loud steps separated by perhaps as much as a second or more. We started to call out the name of the guy we had dropped off earlier in the morning, but we got no answer. We quickly realized that there was no way this guy could have traversed the distance in the time between when we had dropped him off and when we first heard these strange footsteps. The footsteps continued, albeit somewhat more hesitantly. So I grabbed an axe that we were carrying with us and tried to cautiously sneak up closer. Unfortunately, as I walked closer to the sound, my partner grew very frightened and made quite a fuss about me getting any closer. I'll regret it for the rest of my life, but I reluctantly heeded her concerns and returned to the plot. And shortly afterwards, the footsteps mysteriously stopped, and we never heard them at that location again. We chalked it up to some strange animal, but admitted that it was very strange, and that we didn't have a reasonable explanation for it. Later in the day, we stopped for lunch at an area maybe 100 or 200 meters to the north of where we had had this unusual encounter. This area was a very open, selectively logged, second-growth Douglas fir woodland with tall trees and very open understory. Visibility here was very good. About 50 meters or so to the north of us, within the forest, was a low raised ridge running east to west. The forest was quite quiet during this middle-of-summer day, and while eating lunch we heard a single, distinct twig snap, coming from just around the other side of the ridge from where we were sitting. There was no sound before or after that, and of course that's not conclusive of anything really. But it was just suspicious that once again there seemed to be a large animal of some sort just outside of where we could see. If it was the same animal from earlier in the morning, well, then it seemed to be following us. We moved on with the day, and towards the end of it we came to an even more open area of the forest, and standing on the side of a hillside, we decided to split up for some reason. I can't honestly remember why we decided that. This site was perhaps 200 meters from where we had been for lunch. Anyway, I stood on the hillside while my partner walked down an old skid trail towards the east. About 40 meters or so to the east, next to the skid trail, was a distinct dome-shaped knoll within the forest opening. As my partner walked along the trail and past the knoll, suddenly, out of nowhere, some huge animal jumped up on the other side of it, out of sight from me, and whatever it was started running and crashing from the area behind the hill towards the edge of the forest, some 20 meters from where it jumped up. My partner started screaming hysterically, and although I couldn't see the creature, I could certainly hear the crashing as it ran for the trees. My partner just started screaming, "I see it! I see it!" And I instantly ran towards her. By the time I reached her, no more than 30 seconds after this animal had leapt up and ran away, I asked her what she had seen. She couldn't even talk. She was quite shaken up. She said that she never saw the whole thing, but she did make out the top of its head or back above the vegetation as it ran away. The vegetation that it ran through was a red huckleberry thicket, a common woodland shrub in this region. I walked down to where she had seen it run away, and the huckleberry bushes were well over my head in height, and I stand at 6'3". She said the color of the thing that she saw was pretty dark, black almost. And whatever it was seemed to have been quietly tucked in behind the knoll within a short distance from us while we stood there. We never saw it arriving at that location, so it must have either quietly snuck there or maybe been there for a while. So, yeah, what to make of this sighting? We have few large mammals on Vancouver Island. Columbian black-tailed deer, Roosevelt elk, gray wolf, cougar, some black bear. So right away we were quite limited in options for the sighting, and only 2 of those, bear and elk, have any dark brown or black coloration. So again, we're limited. I have extensive experience with both bear and elk, and at no time have I ever had either species A, walk bipedally, or in the case of bear, walk bipedally long enough in dense brush whereas to sound like a human being, B, stand in excess of 7 feet, C, seem to quietly sneak around and apparently follow people, always seeming to just stay out of sight. I mean, I suppose a bear could do that, but I still don't think that it would be quite so sneaky. Of course, I'm assuming that all 3 incidences we had were connected. And I do believe that that is the truth, because while we worked in that rather small woodlot for 2 months, nothing like any of those 3 occurrences ever happened before or after that one day. Anyway, I've been thinking about that day now for many years, and I still believe that there is a good chance that the animal we encountered was a Sasquatch. I've been laughed at by others when I tell the story, and have therefore generally stopped telling it. But as an open-minded biologist, I definitely lean strongly towards Sasquatch. Yeah, I am a believer in Sasquatch, and I've read a lot on the subject over the past 5 or 6 years. I mean, what would those who are more knowledgeable on the subject than myself make of the situation? The whole thing seemed very different to me than any other experience I have ever had in the wilderness, and I have spent my whole life in the bush. The Man on the Roof by OK Cow. This happened to my family back in 2017. At the time, it was absolutely terrifying, but now, after a few drinks at social gatherings, it's one of those stories I tell just to see people's reactions. I was 18 and in my first year of university, still living at home with my parents and my 14-year-old brother. My sleep schedule was a disaster. I'd regularly be up until 4 a.m. studying or working on papers. The first sign that something was off was a set of men's footprints in the fresh snow, leading right up to the window where I usually sat late at night. My dad immediately knew they weren't his, as the snow was new overnight. Then, a couple of weeks later, we discovered that the screen to the basement window had been ripped off and neatly placed beside it. The window, thankfully, was locked from the inside. I left town the week before Christmas to visit my boyfriend's family. When I got back, everyone at home was acting weird as hell. I figured it was just because they didn't love the idea of me staying overnight at my boyfriend's house. But then I noticed my dad had tied pop cans to the inside of the main doors. When I asked him about it, he gave me this serious look, like he really didn't want to tell me something. But after a little pressing, he finally caved. While I was away, my brother had asked to sleep in my room since my room had a TV. One night, around 1 a.m., he was watching Seinfeld when he heard a noise outside. He glanced at the window, only to see a man staring right back at him. Now, to emphasize how insane this was, my bedroom was on the 2nd floor. The only way to reach that window was by climbing onto the slanted roof below, maybe 12 or so feet. Trying to stay calm, my brother slipped out of my room and into my parents' bedroom, and he calmly notified my dad, "There's a man outside on the roof." My dad, half asleep, assumed he was just full of shit and heard the house creak. But he got up anyway, walked into my room, and looked out the window. At first, my dad saw nothing. But when he leaned out further to check the roof, there, crouched just to the right, was a man squatting and staring directly at him. My dad screamed a string of profanities, grabbed a baseball bat, and bolted for the back door. My dad couldn't have jumped on the roof himself, as the lowest point of the window was probably about 5 feet from the floor and was too small for him to fit through. But by the time he got outside, the man was already gone. My dad even ran down the street looking for him, but he never found him. The police were called, but nothing ever came of it. And here's the most infuriating part. We knew there was a registered sex offender living just 2 doors down. His previous crimes? Yeah, they were against girls my age. He approached teenage girls in public parks and exposed himself. The cops went to his house at 1:30 in the morning and knocked repeatedly, shouting, "Police, open up!" But when he didn't answer, they shrugged and said there was nothing more they could do. He and his wife's vehicles were both in the driveway. For the rest of the time my family lived in that house, we had to live with the sickening knowledge that our neighbor was probably watching me for who knows how long. I didn't often shut my curtains, being on the 2nd floor, and I'm an extremely heavy sleeper as well, and may not have heard any sounds from outside. To this day, I have to wonder what could have happened had my brother not noticed him on the roof. Shady Teenage Best Friend by Anonymous. Honestly, I can be a paranoid person, but I knew this situation went a little too far. I had this friend. Being an awkward teenager in a small town, it was hard to make friends, at least with any with the same interests as me. We had a new student, and most people wanted to be his friend. He was a decently attractive guy, artsy, and pretty introverted. Most girls were trying to hit on him, but I just wanted to be his friend. He never really wanted to talk to anyone, but I never thought that was weird. I mean, most teenagers are like that. We ended up being friends, and this led me to do some semi-risky things for about 2 years. From going places that we shouldn't have been going to, shoplifting, some substance abuse, and other stupid shit. He was all into this spooky stuff, from animations and music, etc. I thought it was kind of cool, all dark and mysterious, meant to be all ominous. He kept journals of random things, nothing I was allowed to see. He did have a few drawings of random cult-like figures, saying he wanted to create his own fake cult. After a while, I figured out he was not in the right headspace. From seeing a lot of mental health specialists to having distant parents, I was also a teen who struggled, but something definitely changed with him. He was always begging me to go 5 hours out of town at 3 a.m., trying to get me to sneak out with him even after I said no, always telling me how we would be back by morning. I mean, just getting more and more reckless. One time we went to an abandoned shed. Well, it was definitely not abandoned. We found pictures of dead animals and other hunting gear. This guy seemed a little too fascinated, and I just wanted to get the hell out of there. That was probably the point when things got really weird. He started asking me to come collect dead animals off the street with him. I mean, I was not down with that, though I did try to keep an open mind. Maybe he was into taxidermy. But after a while, I had a feeling he was not. And if he was, it was a little excessive. One day, I found multiple bleach buckets of dead animals that had been in there for weeks on end. I mean, it smelled and it was gross, and frankly, kind of terrifying. After I found that, I didn't speak to him anymore. Later on, he ended up asking me to be friends again, and I said no. And a little while after that, I heard that he had gone to a mental hospital. So, to my teenage sort of best friend, I hope you got better, but let's not meet again. Satanic Cult Encounter, submitted by Brad. I don't know where to start. Let me just say that I'm a strong Christian, and you should never mess with evil. Just over 2 years ago, in early October, me and a few of my friends had been out toilet papering people every week. It was sort of our little tradition. We had always heard of a supposedly satanic cult that was nearby, about 10 minutes from our high school. At that point, we had graduated, and we thought it would be fun if we sneaked onto the cult's property and TP'd them. My friends had been drinking a little, so I drove my friend's car, and we parked down the road in some lumberyard type of deal. We all wore masks and were dressed in dark clothing, and I was scared myself because I've always wanted to see something with my own eyes, and I really thought I was about to. The place was in the middle of nowhere, and that night had a pretty full moon. I just remember it being fairly light outside. We had to climb through a fence, and we took our time about it. There were a total of 5 of us: Jesse L., Jesse D., Alex, Andy, and myself. Once we got through the fence, there was a grass pasture, and we were all walking slowly, when there was a loud, eerie noise that, to me, sounded like an old screen door slamming shut. We all froze and bent down at the knees. As far as we could tell, though, no one else was around. So, after several minutes of just standing there, we continued. We got to a forest-like area with trails and a small building, and a very old, small church. On it was a sign that said Church of Christ. There was a light on the outside, and we tried to open the front door, but it was locked. We stood around for at least another 15 minutes trying to look inside this church, but it was dark inside. But at one point, I swore I heard something move across the floor. So nothing really happening at this cult, we just left. We walked back down the dirt road to the lumber place to get into my friend's car. And I had the keys, but I couldn't get the door open. The key wouldn't work. My friend even tried, and the door would not unlock. Now, this thing had an old keychain thing to push lock and unlock, but they didn't work. And without me pressing anything, all of a sudden the alarm on the car went off and the lights started flashing. And suddenly the car was unlocked. We all piled in because supposedly the guy who owned the lumberyard was one mean son of a bitch. I put it into drive and got cruising down the road when all of a sudden the lights in the car just shut off. We were in complete darkness. I hadn't touched anything. While I was fumbling around for the switch, the lights came back on. And I slammed on the brakes, and of course the lights shut off again. So I don't know if it was a spirit or a demon messing with us, just kind of saying, "Don't mess with me." I will add, we did check all the fuses later, and we looked at the electrical system, but no other warning lights came on. As far as we knew, everything with the car was working properly, except for that time when the lights were turning off. So we didn't end up TPing anyone. The car did its weird thing. But the scariest thing happened when I got home the next day. And I live about 25 miles from where the cult supposedly was. I pulled up into my driveway, and I saw multiple cats, like a whole bunch of them. It was about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, and the sun was glaring. I really couldn't tell how many there were, but there were a lot. I mean, I had one cat, but where did all these other cats come from? So I got out of my car, and I do love cats, but not these ones. All of them were black and, quite frankly, looked identical. None of them were fully grown. I have no idea where they came from. When I went in and talked to my dad, he didn't have any idea where they came from. They just happened to appear out of nowhere. And this all happened the day after I went messing around at a supposed satanic cult. So I told a few people, and my sister works with a guy who was supposedly a ghost hunter on the side. She told him about it, and he felt that in his best estimation, it was a warning sign not to be taken lightly, and that bad things come in threes. 3 of the black cats would not leave our property. All the other ones went wherever they went. I have no idea where they got off to. But these 3 would not leave. My dad called a friend that lived way out in the country that said he would take them. So I gathered them up and put them in a box and drove about 7 miles from where I lived. The weird thing is when I took them out to this country place on a small road, an all-black car followed me down 2 different roads that I was driving on. And again, these were rarely traveled roads. I put my blinker on to go down an even smaller road that was actually more like a fire road. My dad's friend really lived out in the boondocks. When I looked in my rearview mirror, this strange black car suddenly put its blinker on and followed me. At that point, I said, screw this, and just hit the gas and drove as fast as I could to my dad's friend's house. I pulled into his driveway, and he was standing on the porch. I jumped out of my car, grabbing the cats out of the box, handed them to him, and said, sorry, man, I gotta go. Come to think of it, I never saw that black car pass by my dad's friend's house. It's like it just disappeared. Now, if bad things do come in threes, and that black car was the 3rd thing, I'm glad I got away from that unscathed. Nothing else happened, but I do know this. My friends bring up that cult every once in a while, but after what happened to me, I will not go back out and mess with that again. Figure Skating Fans by Salty Thing. I'm not a people person. I'm an introvert with resting bitch face who looks pissed off even when I'm not. Why are kooks attracted to me? I've begged God, Goddess, Allah, Buddha, Cthulhu, and the Flying Spaghetti Monster for answers. I think there must be some kind of flashing neon, here's your soulmate sign over my head that only wackos, social rejects, and serial killers can see. If I manage to evade these fruitcakes, my idiot friends who nag me to be more outgoing, help them track me down. I beg them to not give out my contact info, but they're always like, aw, Salty's made a friend, and hand over my phone number. Yeah, my friends suck. When I was younger, I competed in figure skating. I picked up 2 fans in 1994. I had just come off the ice in Tulsa, and I sat on a bench to await my marks. A rink guard waved over to me and said, hey, Salty, there's a guy out here who wants your autograph. What? We're just amateurs. Why would somebody want my autograph? I just said, you're kidding. He said, no, that's him over there. But the rink guard said, no, that's him over there, pointed. The fan was waiting near the gate onto the ice, and he held out a spiral notebook. I went over to him, and he said, I'm Clay. I really, really love your Star Wars spotlight. My niece skated 2 hours ago, but I stayed just to watch you compete. I saw you do it in Houston and Fort Worth. This guy was blonde and not bad looking, but his blue eyes seemed to be fixated on me. He grinned and never blinked when I signed, to Clay, you're my first ever autograph. Thanks, best wishes, Salty. That's when I said, you saw my Spotlight program? That was weird, because Spotlight is an event where skaters perform an entertainment program in costumes with props. Mine was to the Imperial March from The Empire Strikes Back. I wear the full-face Darth Vader helmet and outfit. So how did he recognize me? The event that I had just finished was a freestyle program, not Spotlight. Nah, it's probably okay. His niece is a skater, and my name is in the program, I thought. He went on, yeah, I'm a Star Wars superfan. You don't see much anymore now that the trilogy's finished, and Chelsea and I were thrilled when you skated out. Chelsea's my niece. Hey, did you win? I replied, "Yes, I did, thank you. How did Chelsea do?" I was looking around, but none of the many kids who were there seemed to be with this guy. "Did you win both times?" he asked. "We thought you were brave to skate in that Vader mask." I said, "Yes, I did win at both competitions. I hope Chelsea had a good skate." He said, "She got the bronze. Chelsea's my niece. She went home with my sister." He was still staring. I don't think he blinked once. He went on, "I didn't like that other girl's Beach Boys program. We wanted you to win." I finally said, "Yeah, well, thanks. Please congratulate Chelsea for me. Thanks for asking for the autograph. I hope you enjoy the rest of the competition." He said, "Thank you. Chelsea's my niece." Again. Okay, this is getting weird, I thought. Then he went on again. "We don't like that girl from Dallas. She skated in a bikini." Okay, this is really weird. So I said, "Oh, Jill? I thought she was brave to take the ice in a swimsuit. It made me shiver just to look at her. She's a great skater. Beach Boys music always puts everybody in a good mood, too." "Well, we didn't like it," he said. "She wore a bikini to the ice rink, and there are little kids here." Now he was glaring at me. "Well, I'm glad you like my skit," I said. "Enjoy the rest of your competition and have a safe trip home." I was so ready to get out of there. "I'll watch your other events tonight and cheer you on." Ugh, I thought. So I just said, "That's so nice of you. My results should be up now. Excuse me. You have a great rest of your weekend." Then he said, "I'll wait to see how you did. Come show me your medal." Oh, shit, I thought. I just said, "Thank you, you're very kind." Well, my results were up, and I got a silver medal. Not bad. The lobby was crowded with lines of skaters waiting to take the ice for the drill team warm-up. Nathan, a skater friend from Dallas, weaved through the lines and said, "Hey, Devin says somebody wanted your autograph. You turning into a big star?" And I said, "No, it was just some oddball who liked my Vader spotlight. He says he's going to be here tonight, too." As I said, my results were up, I got a silver medal, and Nathan high-fived me. Then I heard it. "Salty! Salty!" Everyone stopped talking and stared. Clay was standing down rinkside, way down the rail, almost at the other end of the rink. He leaned over the rail waving his arms, and I held up my medal, and he hollered, "Yay, Salty!" Unfortunately, my guardian angel didn't pluck me out from this incredibly embarrassing moment. Nathan offered to keep me company at the night events because I made the trip without my husband. Clay left messages at the competition registration desk with his phone number. He called the headquarters hotel, had them ring my room, and left a voicemail inviting me to dinner with him, Chelsea, and her parents. Of course, I didn't reply. Unfortunately, the hotel didn't give him my room number. 3 days after I got home, he had sent a big envelope addressed to me in care of my rink. Inside were 2 8x10 photos. One was a blown-up photo that he had taken of me during my Vader number. The second was the medal stand at this year's U.S. National Championships. But he had cut Nancy Kerrigan's head off, replaced it with mine, and wrote, "Salty, 1994 Olympic gold medalist" at the top, and drew a heart around me. At that point, I got scared. I had a real stalker when I was in high school, and he made my life hell for years. But calling the cops on that guy was pointless since he hadn't done anything illegal. Now, my rink has its tournament over the 4th of July weekend. And this guy showed up, waited near the desk, and then pounced. This time, my husband was with me, and Clay got loud and obnoxious, ranting about our connection, calling me vulgar names, accused me of lying by not telling him that I was married, and using him to cheat on my husband. My husband was a sweet, mild-mannered guy, but he almost decked Clay because Clay grabbed my hand and showed him I wasn't wearing a wedding ring. Yeah, I don't when I skate. And finally, security threw Clay out and threatened to call the police if he didn't leave. He mailed another vile letter to my rink, saying that I supposedly enticed him and led him on and was going to use him. But Clay wasn't the only weirdo I would ever run into. The second weirdo I would run into was a fellow skater who wasn't dangerous, but he did get a crush on me despite the fact that my husband had passed away, like I was going to fall into his arms in a matter of weeks. As I just said, in 1995, my husband passed away. I was in shock for months, and it was all I could do just to get out of bed in the morning. My grief therapist advised me to start skating again, so I returned to my rink in the spring of 1996. It wasn't easy because there were many reminders of my husband. My friends in skating club were very kind, though, and that fall I felt ready to enter a competition. 3 other skaters and I always traveled together unless my husband was alone. We joined friends from other clubs for dinner after the competition and discussed an upcoming all-adult event in Las Vegas. One friend, whom I'll call Chip, said his aunt rented houses to upscale Vegas tourists. He promised a posh place for less than a hotel rate. So 8 of us made the trip together, and Chip delivered. The house had a pool, hot tub, billiard room, and gaming system. We brought other skaters home to party every night. 2 weeks later, I went to practice, and Chip was in the locker room with flowers. "Happy birthday," he said. I was touched that he'd flown in from Dallas just to surprise me. He waited through my session with my coach, and we skated for a couple of hours, and then we broke for lunch. When he said he needed to rent a room, I, of course, said he could stay at my apartment. We went clubbing that night with all of our friends, and Chip flew home to Dallas the next day. Chip emailed several times that week and said he was looking at jobs in my city, and could he stay with me on Tuesday for his interview, and I said of course. That night a friend called from Dallas and asked why I didn't tell her the good news about me and Chip. And I said, "What?" Chip had told everyone he was getting a job in my city and moving in with me. The parties in Vegas, chats in the hot tub, his birthday surprise, weren't him being a supportive friend. Chip had it in his head that we were dating. And remember, I hadn't dated anybody in years. Chip hadn't mentioned love or even tried to kiss me, and if he had, I would have said no and told him that he was just a friend. I called him and he blew up and then cried. I tried to tell him how sorry I was that he'd misunderstood and pointed out he'd never even said a word about his feelings. None of that helped. He called me, emailed me, flew back, and tried to push his way inside my apartment. I was so scared that I ended up staying with a friend. I got calls from angry skaters all over the country. Our pals who went to Vegas took up for me, saying we did not have the hot, sexy romp he was claiming. But for some reason, people took sides. Honestly, the whole thing was ugly and embarrassing. I ended up having to change my phone number and block his email. Chip even tried calling me at work, so I had to tell my boss everything. And whenever he tried to leave a message with my coach, she said that he could skate or compete at our rink, but would be thrown out if he ever bothered me again. After that, I stopped entering his home rink's events. So yeah, Clay and Chip, let's not meet again. Walker Valley, submitted by Unexplained 123. Last summer, my stepdad and I went to this one dirt biking pit called Walker Valley in Washington State. It was a Wednesday morning when we went there, and there weren't that many people around at all, except for a few other bikers here and there. It turns out that my stepdad and I were the only ones using the main dirt path. So, my dad and I were riding our dirt bikes up and down these small dirt hills, and he was a few feet ahead of me. As I was following him, my bike started slowing down, and then the engine started sputtering. I kept on twisting the throttle, but my bike just wouldn't speed up. And then suddenly, it came to a complete stop. My stepdad didn't stop or even look around because I guess he either didn't know that I had stopped or he just didn't feel like waiting for me. So there I was, alone, with what I thought was a dead bike. I used the kickstart, and my bike sputtered again, but still wouldn't start up. I kick-started it again, and this time I noticed that there was a really weird smell coming from the tailpipe, as well as a really dark-colored smoke every time I tried to start it. I looked into the tailpipe thinking maybe something had gotten in there, but it was perfectly clear. So I kick-started my bike a few times again, and finally it caught. I caught up with my dad, and we rode around for a few more hours, but my bike did keep acting strange, and it even did come to a stop one more time. And later in the afternoon, we left and headed for home. And when we got home, my dad went inside to use the bathroom while I was taking my bike down from the back of the truck. I walked it into the garage and started giving it a full inspection because I wanted to see what was wrong with it. When I opened the side hood to look into the engine, I was shocked and disgusted at what I saw. There was thick brown hair entangled all over the engine. Long hair. There was some smoke and a nasty burning smell, and I was really surprised because before we left for the park, I had checked the engine, and there wasn't anything in there at all like this. I kept staring at the hair, and it had looked like it had really wound itself up in there pretty good. I mean, this was obviously what had been causing my bike trouble. So I got some tools, and I picked it all out. It was really disgusting, and it took me like 20 minutes to get it all cleared away. After I got all the burnt hair out, I threw it away in the trash, and then I went inside and asked my mom if she knew anything about the hair. Her hair was almost the same color as the stuff that was in my bike. She looked at me weird and said she hadn't even been near my bike, and besides, her hair was short, like a guy's. I was tired at that point, so I just decided to crash and took a long nap in my room. When I woke up, it was nighttime. I wanted to take a shower before I went back to sleep. So I got in the shower and started washing my hair, and as I was rinsing it out, I looked down and saw some long brown hair sticking out of the drain. And then I realized that some of it was on my feet and felt like it was trying to tangle or wrap around my toes. I screamed out loud and almost slipped backwards. I jumped out of the shower and ran out of there and into my room, naked, wet, and shivering. I mean, I was really scared. I mean, it couldn't have possibly been my hair because I'm blonde. And my stepdad? Yeah, he's bald. My mom came running up the stairs after she had heard me and asked me what was wrong. I just looked at her for a minute and said nothing. I dried off and went to bed and then tried to sleep. The next morning, I cautiously went into the bathroom and looked in the tub. The hair was gone. I have never told anyone this story before until now. I still can't explain exactly what happened, and fortunately, it hasn't happened again. I'm still kind of scared to take showers, and I do take them. And hopefully, someday I'll get over what happened to me and just move on with my life. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like me to narrate, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. If you're catching this on YouTube and you like what you've heard, please give the video a thumbs up and maybe leave a comment below. Let me know what you thought of the stories. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you haven't already subscribed, hey, why not? Maybe even tell a friend about the channel. I would certainly appreciate it. Follow me on social media. If you'd like to support the channel further, find a link to my Patreon page in the description, and maybe even consider purchasing some Uncle Josh and Campfire Crew merchandise. A link to my storefront at tpublic.com is in the description as well. I'll remind everybody, not every design I have on there is related directly to the Campfire Crew and Uncle Josh. There's a couple of funny ones up there, Bigfoot and a goofy Star Wars one. That actually is the most popular thing that I have. Anyway, go check it out. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.